Hello students, welcome back. Today we are going to discuss the poem Fire and Ice. But before we dwell upon the poem Fire and Ice, let's have a casual talk. Let's talk about the creation of the world. How was the world created? Some say that the world was created out of a big bang or big explosion. The theory of the Big Bang, that some sort of a cloud developed high up in the sky and there was a big explosion which caused the formation of the great Milky Way, in which our sun and its solar system are a part. The Earth is one of the planets of this solar system. They say that stars are born and the stars also die. Each star in the sky has a lifespan. How does a star die? How is a star born? The star is born out of a nebula. Some sort of gases, they come together to form a star. It takes millions and millions of years for a star to form. When a star is born, along with the star may have or may not have its own system, its own planetary system. It is said that around 20 million stars have planets. Only 20 million stars have planets. That is, these are the stars which have been discovered to have planets. Amongst these stars, the sun is one such star. Do you know almost every star has a twin brother, a similar star? The sun too has its own twin brother. If you look up at the sky on a clear night, you will notice some stars glow with the same ratio of illumination. The light that they give seems so similar that these stars seem identical. They seem as if they were formed during the same time, out of the same material. So, when a star is born, a star also dies. The death of a star is a slow process. The star may die either coming across a black hole, where the black hole will suck the star in and take away all its energy, or the star may die by gradually losing its heat, losing its centrifugal force, losing its gravitational force, thereby dispersing its energy and expanding into a huge giant. When the star expands, the color of the star changes from yellow or from bright golden color to a fiery red inferno, a very red hot giant. Our sun too someday would go through this process. Right now, our sun is a young star. It will take millions and millions of years for the sun to become a red giant. But when the sun will become a red giant, the sun will become so big that it might engulf some of its planets, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars might come into its radius, and we would be a part of the sun. So, the poem here, Fire and Ice, they say that Fire and Ice was inspired when Robert Frost was traveling in a train and he came across an astronomer, an astronomer who was very well known during those days. The name of the astronomer was Harlow Shapley. He was a prominent astronomer and he claims to have inspired Fire and Ice. Shapley describes how he met the poet Robert Frost a year before the poem was published, in which Frost, noting that Shapley was the astronomer of his days, asked him how the world will end. And Shapley responded that the earth either would be engulfed by the sun will explode and incinerate the earth, or somehow the earth will manage to escape. The earth will manage to escape this fate. The earth might, when the sun loses its gravitational pull, the earth might drift away so far into space that gradually it will freeze in deep space. So, the poem Fire and Ice is very, very symbolic in nature. The symbolism used here, fire. Fire symbolizes our desires, our passions. Sometimes our desire is so great to achieve certain things that we forget the path that we are choosing to attain our desires, to fulfill our desires. Trishna, pyas, the thirst, the desire of the human body is so great that we tend to take the wrong path to fulfill our desires. Therefore, fire symbolizes in this poem all the passions in our heart, all the desires in our heart. And ice is a symbol of hatred. Ice is a symbol of negativity. The poem Fire and Ice by Robert Frost goes in a simple 9-line poem. Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. From what I have tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction, ice is also great and would suffice. If you see this poem, if you read this poem, the poem is like a funnel from broad to narrow. The poem becomes broad to narrow in a sense that it narrows down to a point where hatred is also enough to finish this world. Fire and Ice is a popular poem by Robert Frost that discusses the end of the world, likening the elemental force of fire with the emotion of desire and ice with hate. This poem was published in December 1920. The poem was first published in Harper's Magazine and in 1923 in Robert Frost's Pulitzer Prize winning book New Hampshire. Fire and Ice is one of Robert Frost's best known and most anthologized poems. According to one of Robert Frost's biographers, Fire and Ice was inspired by a passager in Canto 32 of Dante's Inferno. Dante's Inferno is Dante tried to explain hell, how hell would be. According to Dante, hell would be like an ever burning fire, perpetual fire, a fire that has no end. And those who are the greatest of sinners would be submerged into the deepest pit of this fire. Dante's Inferno, in which the worst offenders of hell, that is the traitors, are submerged unto their necks in ice, while a fiery hell, a lake so bound with ice, a lake where there is ice everywhere. It did not look like water, the lake did not look like water, but like a glass, bright and clear. Harlow Shapley, a prominent astronomer, he claims to have inspired Fire and Ice. As I told you earlier, Shapley describes an encounter he had with Frost a year before the poem was published, in which Frost, noting that Shapley was the astronomer of his days, asked him how the world will end. Shapley responded that either the sun will explode and incinerate the earth, or the earth will somehow escape this fate, only to end up slowly freezing in deep space. Shapley was surprised at seeing Fire and Ice in print a year later and referred of how science can influence the creation of art or clarify its meaning. The poem is written in a single 9-line stanza which greatly narrows in the last 2 lines. The poem's meter is an irregular mix of iambic tetrameter and dimeter, and the rhyming scheme is ABA in the first 3 lines, ABC in the next 3 lines, and BCB in the last 3 lines. This suggests but departs from the rigorous pattern of Dante's tetrarima. Fire and Ice signal for Robert Frost a new style, a new tone, a new manner, and a new form of writing poetry. Its casual tone masks the serious question it possesses to the reader. The question asked in this poem is very serious, but the way the poem is been put, it acts as a mask. It disguises the poem into a very simple poem, but has a lot of deeper thought in it, a deeper thought process. If you see the literal and metamorphical insight of the poem, the literal poem seems very simple, just a single 9 line poem, but metamorphically, symbolically, it has a great meaning. Let's read the poem once again and try to understand it line by line. Fire and ice. Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. See the figure of speech here. Alliteration. The word so or s, the sound of s has been repeated. The sound of w has been repeated in the first line, and also in the second line the sound of s has been repeated. Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. When it is discussed, how would the world end? What will be the end of the world? So people have their own conclusion, they come to their own conclusion. Some people say that the world might end burning up, exploding into the sun, or some say that it might move away from the sun. As people are saying that, scientists say that every year the moon is moving an inch away from the earth. It is drifting away from the earth, and once it breaks the zone of earth's gravitational pull, it will twirl away, it will swing away so far that we will not have a moon to influence our tides. Without the moon, there will be a lot of imbalance in the earth. The moon also has some force that it exerts on the earth is exerting some force on the moon. But scientists say that the moon is inching away every year. So also the earth is inching away from the sun. And if it moves away from the sun, the earth will freeze into space. What is the cause of life on the earth? One of the causes is the exact distance from its parent star, from its sun. We are at the right distance where the heat supports life. If we get too close, the earth will burn up. If we move too far away, the earth will freeze. So some people say that the earth would either end in fire, while some say that the earth will either end in ice. From what I have tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. So here the poet brings out the symbolism of fire. He is comparing fire to human passion, to human desires. See, there's a difference between what we need and what we want. Our needs are limited, but our wants are unlimited. There's no end to our wants. I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that. But to sustain ourselves, our needs, our basic needs are very few. But the passion that we have, the desires that we have, this desire takes us deeper into passion. And that is why Robert Frost said that from what I have tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. The First World War, the Second World War, the cause of these two wars were the desires to acquire more and more territory, to acquire a larger market. Even today, the desire of China to be a global superpower, an economic giant. They say that this pandemic, the coronavirus, which started from Wuhan, is no less than a biological weapon. And if it is true, this is what the poem was suggesting, that the world would end with fire. The desire to rule over the economic world China wanted to dominate the world, USA wanted to dominate the world. These two giants were trying to compete with one another. And suddenly there was this pandemic, COVID 19, coronavirus, which has prolonged itself till now, 2020. Today's date is 28th of September. And yet there is no relief from this pandemic. Thousands and thousands of people are dying because of this dreaded disease. And if it's really a biological war, then what Robert Frost was saying, that the world would end with fire, is very close to this truth. From what I have tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. So fire need not be a burning, a glowing inferno. It is a desire in your heart to be the greatest, to achieve the greatest, to achieve the best, to have the best. This desires leads us into a wrong path. But again, the meter of the poem changes when he goes to the next 5 lines. The next 5 lines, he says, but if it had to perish twice, it means the earth. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction, ice is also great and would suffice. Here, see, again he has brought hate. He's comparing hate to ice. The cold in the heart, the hatred towards fellow humans. So he said, if the earth would perish twice, if the earth were to perish twice, if the earth was to die twice, he says he knows enough of hate to say that for destruction, ice is also great. To destroy the earth, hatred is also enough and would suffice. So both fire and ice are symbolic. They are imagery, they are symbolism. They are used as symbols. So there are many ideas about how the world would end. Do you think that someday the world would really end? Have you ever thought what would happen if the sun got so hot that it burst? Oh, the sun would grow colder and colder. For Frost, what do fire and ice stand for? Here are some ideas: greed, avarice, cruelty, lust, conflict, fury, intolerance, rigidity, insensitivity, coldness, indifference, and hatred. So what is the rhyming scheme of the poem? I gave you the rhyming scheme. How does it help in bringing out the contrasting ideas in the poem? So I hope I have made this poem clear to you all. And I hope you stay safe at home from this pandemic, the coronavirus, from this hate of coronavirus.